he was actually fired prior to the thing for releasing his findings to the press and stuff. And so after the fire, he testified saying that one of the guys, a fellow by the name of Al Holmberg, he stated that the first mention of fire was about 10 or 12 minutes before the capsule actually ruptured, and that they had tried to get out for 5 minutes, right? And now Holmberg later denied what he told Barron, but another fellow, a guy, an RCA technician by the name of Gary Probst, he told a similar story. He said that it was at least 3 minutes or so from when the astronauts first cried out, and then when the capsule basically filled with flames, because he was watching the actual thing on the monitors. He was actually watching the thing, and there was a group of other people watching it with him, and he was like screaming, "Blow the hatch! Why don't they blow the hatch?" He didn't know that they didn't have an explosive hatch, like they had on the Mercury days and stuff.
Right.
Basically, he was watching this thing, and they were having a discussion as to how long their suits would protect them from the fire, and like how, could they get out or not? How long will it take to get the hatch open and stuff? And so, because like during this time, during the time of this conversation, right, the air inside it was still clear. And shortly then after that, about 2 or 3 minutes after that, the flames began to lick in front of a window. And here's the thing too: Paul P. Haney, one of the guys at NASA, he actually, after the fire, he acknowledged that they had videotape of the disaster, because like they had a camera there watching the capsule burn, right? So they had videotape of the disaster, right? Now we are told there's no videotape. There's no videotape. Mark Gray, who actually sells stock footage, the spacecraft films guy who used the DMCA abuse, right? He has publicly said that there is no footage of the fire. No footage exists. Even though NASA, on the night of the fire, they actually confirmed that they had videotape of this stuff, right? Now we're told that no footage of the fire was recorded.
Weird.
Right? Well, we know that footage. I know. We know that footage of the fire exists, and NASA and evidently spacecraft films are suppressing it. Okay, quite frankly, I wouldn't want to see the footage. I don't want to see the astronauts die like so horribly. But that footage needs to be released because we need proof. We need proof that just to how long these astronauts last. We need to settle this thing once and for all, because we got witnesses saying that they saw them trying to get out there for like 10 or 5 minutes or so, right? And now NASA is told that the first mention of fire to the moment the capsule ruptured was only 15 seconds. I don't want to see the astronauts dying as much as the next guy, but that footage needs to be released to set the record straight.
Yeah, so we can study it and figure out what actually happened.
Exactly. We need to set this aside. Was it 15 minutes? Was it 10 minutes? Was it 5 minutes? Was it 15 seconds? Which was it? We need to just set the record straight once and for all. But
they're saying that it doesn't even exist. So it's how you even.
They're saying it doesn't even exist.
Yeah. So you're almost.
They're saying it doesn't exist.
There's no further you can really take that then, right? I mean, if they say it doesn't exist, and what are they going to one day just say, "Oh, we found it"? I mean, there's no. You're at like a dead end on that, I guess, right?
No, it's we're trying to get NASA to acknowledge the truth is like talking to a brick wall.
Exactly.
And
well, what about
that's the Apollo 1 for you. Yeah, basically Grissom was complaining about Apollo, said it wasn't going to work, and NASA, they needed to silence him. He opened his mouth, he had to go. Recently, Gus Grissom's son, Scott, he was actually granted access to the wreckage. The capsule it's stored in Langley Research Center, I think it is. And he was actually granted access to the remains of the capsule, and he found evidence that a metal plate had actually been shoved behind the dashboard to deliberately trigger a spark when an astronaut pressed this button.
Wow. That's quite an allegation.
Yeah.
Well, what about the Challenger theory here? Now, what about this conspiracy theory, that there was also, an orchestrated disaster to maintain silence, if you will, and I'll let you flesh that out. But talk about that conspiracy theory, because I'd never heard that aspect of it all.
Okay, well, if you actually speak to any of the Apollo astronauts, or any astronaut for that matter, and ask them about the stars, okay, they would actually not comment in any way about stars. They would say, we'd only see them on the nighttime side, or they'd be dim and fuzzy or whatever and stuff. Okay, it's like, because like in the beginning, Neil Armstrong, he comes back and he says, I couldn't see stars from the daylight side of the moon, and yet we got other astronauts, we got cosmonauts and going up onto the daylight side of the Earth and saying that we saw stars. The Earth is much brighter than the moon is on the daylight side, so you'd think you'd be able to see stars from the moon's surface. You know, and it seems like NASA has basically made it this party line to their astronauts: do not ever talk about the stars. Yeah. You know, and Krista McAuliffe, the teacher who was chosen for the Teacher in Space project. Now, Krista McAuliffe, she was a very outspoken woman. She refused to be scripted by her government handlers. You know, she refused to be censored. She refused to basically tell bullshit to the class, because, you know, like, the education in America, it's pretty poor to say the least. But she wanted to tell it like it is. She wanted to make sure that everything was told accurately. So it's unlikely she would have said you can't see stars whilst on the daylight side of the Earth. You know, and okay, here's the thing about the Challenger, right? The Challenger was launched in cold weather. Okay, see, I'm going to be measuring in metric, so the temperature was about on the launch conditions was -1 degree Celsius. -1 degree Celsius, which is about let me do the calculation.
Well, it's certainly below freezing.
1 degree,
and you know, it's below
1 degree Celsius in. Yeah. So basically, I think I know what that is in Fahrenheit. I use metric, but anyways, the launch conditions was -1 degree Celsius. Now, prior to just the year before that, right? They had another mission in January of the year before, in January 1985, which was Discovery's STS-51C mission. Okay, they all have their own mission numbers. Like a Challenger was STS-51L, this one was STS-51C, and there was Discovery launched in temperatures of only 10 degrees Celsius, which is also freezing, and basically you see what we have the shuttle. If you can understand, right? You see the launch boosters, right? You see the external tank. You see the two right boosters on the other side. Those are basically for lifting the weight of the fuel tank, because it's too heavy for the shuttle to carry. You know, on the launch pad and stuff. So basically, these boosters are what we use to carry the weight of that, and they're basically composed of all these different segments of solid fuel, which are bonded together with these thick rubber O-rings. Okay, that's the ones together with these seals and stuff. And so basically, these O-rings stop hot gases from leaking out. And if the gases leak out, that can cause damage. Like, it can burn the external tank and basically blow it up. And so there was a fellow by the name of Roger Beaujolais who works for Morton Thiokol, which was the company that actually builds these boosters. I actually managed to interview Beaujolais a few months ago and stuff. Beaujolais, he actually took photos of the O-rings from that mission, from the STS-51C, and he noticed in this cold weather, the O-rings, the primary, there's actually two O-rings. There's a primary O-ring and a secondary O-ring. The primary O-ring had failed because of the cold weather. It had been frozen in the cold, and the secondary O-ring was less than a millimeter away from getting burned through completely. Okay, so he submitted a memo to his superiors, basically saying that we need to stop launching in cold weather, otherwise we stand in jeopardy of losing a flight, along with the crew and all the launch pad facilities.
Yeah.
Because he was afraid that this thing would blow up on the launch pad in that cold weather and stuff. Because like, had the S-51C O-ring failed, okay, we would have had a shuttle blowing up as early as 1985. Okay, but in 1986, just a year later, right, they were planning to launch this thing with the Teacher in Space project, and the launch coincided with even colder weather. It was the Discovery launch was 10 degrees Celsius. This one was -1 degree Celsius, and the night before the launch, right, Beaujolais and Thompson and a few other Morton Thiokol engineers, they got together with their management, and they basically they telephoned Marshall Space Flight Center, the guys at NASA, who basically, okay, they need to run some checks before the launch, and they need to know, okay, is everything functional before we launch this thing?
Right.
And so basically, they called up and they said, we advise not launching in cold weather. This is away from goodness, as they say, because they didn't know how low a pressure the O-rings could take. But obviously, the 10 degrees Celsius, that was a clear indication that that was near disastrous. So, oh dear, we're going to be even in even colder weather now. So that's like sure enough to get your show blown up.
Yeah.
So we advised not launching. And the managers from Morton Fire Coal said first of all, we have George Hardy, one of the managers from Marshall. He said he was appalled by the decision, but he would only launch if the fire coal managers said it was safe to launch. And at this stage, fire coal was saying it was unsafe to launch, but various other managers at Marshall were insisting that we launch. Like Lawrence Malloy, he actually said that the fire coal's data was inconclusive, and that he actually challenged them to come up with proof. And to come up with further proof before they say what is safe and what isn't safe. And so basically, all these guys at Marshall were pressuring the managers at Fire Coal to basically change their minds and launch. And finally, the managers at Fire Coal, they say, look, give us a moment, okay, we need to discuss this, and they go on hold. They wanted to go on hold for a minute, which ended up being about half an hour or so, I think. And so the managers, Gerald Mason, Joseph Kilminster and Robert Lund, okay? Robert Lund received the actual memo from Beaujolais Mine. Okay, the Beaujolais, the guy who said that we do not launch in cold weather. Here's the memo. It is the proof that it's dangerous,
Yeah.
So these guys were equally aware, but, pressured by the higher-ups at NASA, they said, look, we need to
make this happen.
To take a vote on this. We need to talk about this. We need to take a vote on it. And eventually, the guy said, you need to take off your engineering cap and put on your management cap. And so when it looked like the managers were changing their mind, Beaujolais and Thompson actually got up and tried to get them to realize that this is a bad idea. Don't change your minds. Look, we have to make sure this thing is postponed. We have to make sure it's in safe weather. But the managers looked like they were changing their minds, and Thompson, they got up, showing charts and stuff, showing the calculations and stuff. And Beaujolais, he got up there screaming, showing them his photos from the damaged O-rings from the other mission. Basically screaming at them, look at this, damn it, look at this. This O-ring is nearly burned away completely. Okay, what do you think's going to happen tomorrow if we launch in even colder weather?
Yeah.
But this time they were told to basically just sit down and shut up. And all three managers agreed to vote to go to launch, and so they went off hold again and said to Marshall, it's a go to launch, and so basically this was purely a management decision. All the engineers were basically told to sit down and shut up at this stage, and so they obviously Marshall Space Flight Center immediately accepted their new decision to launch, which was basically they pressured them into deciding, and so basically they reported that to NASA's top management and stuff. And here's the thing too, right? Another guy by the name of Al McDonald, who was one of the fire coal guys. Okay, he was told that even though we don't agree on this decision and stuff, we will most certainly inform the top NASA management of your concerns. They didn't.
Right.
They didn't. Stanley Ramatas, right? He did not form Jesse Moore or Arnold Aldrich, who were the two top management guys the dangers and stuff. These guys claim they weren't even aware of of any hazard and stuff. And so the next day the O-rings froze up, and they launched the shuttle, and what happened? It blew up. It blew up, silenced all 7 astronauts on board. Now, in the months that followed, right, Marshall and Fire Coal, they ultimately tried to keep lids on everything, and the guys who were actually speaking up, continuing to speak up, Beaujolais and Thompson and all that stuff, they were effectively demoted as punishment for their honesty.
It's very shady. It's very shady.
Yeah. Now, I would like to point out that Beaujolais, he told me that he didn't think it was murdered, but he does feel that it wasn't an accident. He does feel, because like an accident is when you do something, do a bad thing without prior knowledge of the consequences. He was screaming at these bastards, telling them that you launch in this weather, you're going to get the astronauts killed. and you got 7 astronauts killed. You know, he took a really turn for the worse because he became extremely depressed. You know, he felt he had failed the astronauts. You know, he tried to protect them.
Yeah.
Tried to save them. In fact, the astronauts themselves, they were not even informed. You know, normally in the old days, you know, the astronauts would be informed of the shape of their spacecraft before they actually came aboard. Here they weren't even at the teleconference which the arguments arisen. So